text. Mary Schmidt, still can't hear anybody and can't hear me. Transiting problems. Mindy's asleep. Sorry.
Oh,
Mary, it sounds like she can't hear us. Maybe if I remove her, she can come back in. Sorry, everyone. What happened? I'll tell you
I can
later.
text.
Yeah, do you ever
Yeah.
text?
I'll just ask her to join again.
Okay, great. Did I hit record? Yes, great. Okay. It was a perfect time to pause anyway. What do you make of the description of the champion, Goliath? Some of this lore, this legend, and his little speech.
Well, I have no comparison of all these weights but it just makes me feel like, well, apparently because they're mentioning them, it must be. They must be heavy and they must be formidable, to be looking at this spear with 600 shekels. I don't know
And
what
mine
that has any idea what that.
Mine actually gives it pound.
Oh, does it?
Oh, good. So
Yeah.
what is it?
So, he was more than 9 feet tall.
Wow.
He had a bronze helmet and on his head and wore bronze, weighing 125 pounds.
The helmet was?
Bronze
Oh, the-
scale armor weighing 125 pounds. His spear shaft was as strong as the bar on a weaver's loom, and its iron head weighed 15 pounds.
Ooh.
Yeah, those are
So he's
the,
big enough to hold all that
yeah.
armor and all those things. Yeah, but
125 pounds, that's like, well, not me.
so a cubit is, and you'll recognize this from Noah's Ark story. That's that the ark was measured in cubits. Cubit is basically from the elbow to the wrist. So it ends up being about 18 inches.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Everybody's.
So here's a way to do the math. 6 cubits, 6 times 3. Let's say it, let's just double it, is 19, 18.
18.
And then divide by 2, since it's half.
Hmm.
There you go. So he's 9 feet tall.
No,
So,
There's a description
yeah.
from the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is according to my little notes. at the
Ooh,
bottom.
good. I love it.
They say that it was 4 cubits instead of 6, making Goliath 6.5 feet tall, but still a remarkable height by ancient standards.
Sure.
Yeah,
He
that's
was
good.
huge than the rest of the people.
Yeah, whatever it is, he's huge.
Mhm.
And they've put him to good use, making him their lead battleman. And then my notes here says maybe 8 feet tall is probably more.
Very well.
Somewhere between 6 and 9.
6 to 9 feet, ginormous. And he's got a mouth on him too. He's stoking the fire, he's poking the bear of Israel, and it's working. Saul and Israel are afraid. It's made and frightened. What I like about the translation I was reading, it's probably not, it's differently worded than probably what you're looking at, is it kind of almost reads it like Shakespeare poetry or something, just how the verbs and the nouns are kind of out of place a little bit. So
Sally forth.
yeah, like he sallied forth he's prancing, he's a show off. The champion sallied forth. Isn't that great? And the champion, the literal meaning of the Hebrew word is the man between. That is the man who goes out between the opposed battle lines to fight a counterpart. That particular Hebrew term reinforces the spatial definition of the story. So it's very descriptive, and you know why it's so descriptive is because this is a big legend in the story of Israel. I mean, this is the crowning achievement, pun intended, of young King David. This is the answering to his calling. And this is who they wanted. They didn't get the king they wanted in Saul. Now they're going to get the king what some might say deserve in David. That's no secret. We know that's coming. But at this moment, it's all about Goliath. So let me keep going here. So we lost Mary Schmidt, but we're going to try to get her back somehow. It's not, the technology gods are not on our side today. So
I called, but we were having trouble with the phone.
poor thing.
So I'll try again a little bit.
Well, good
We
thing we're
won't give up.
recording. And David was the son of this Ephraite man from Bethlehem in Judah named Jesse. And he had 8 sons. And the man in the days of Saul was old, advanced in years. And the 3 oldest sons of Jesse went after Saul to the war. And the names of his 3 sons who went to the war were Eliab, the firstborn, and the secondborn, Abinadab, and the third, Shammah. As for David, he was the youngest, and the 3 oldest had gone after Saul. And David would go back and forth from Saul's side to tend his father's flock in Bethlehem. And the Philistine came forward morning and evening and took his stand 40 days. Always 40 days, isn't it? And Jesse said to David his son, take prey to your brothers this ephah of parched grain and these 10 loaves of bread, and rush them to the camp of your brothers. And these 10 wedges of cheese you shall bring to the captain of the 1,000, and you shall see if your brothers are well, and you shall take their token. And Saul and they and all the men of Israel are in the valley of the Terebinth fighting with the Philistines. And David rose early in the morning and left the flock with a keeper and bore the provisions and went off as Jesse had charged him. And when he came to the staging ground, the army going out to the lines was shouting the battle cry. And Israel and the Philistines deployed line against line. And David left the gear that was on him with the keeper of the gear. And he ran to the lines and came and asked his brothers if they were well. And he was speaking to them, look, as he was speaking to them, look, or behold, the champion was coming up from the Philistine lines. Goliath, the Philistine from Gath, was his name. And he spoke words to the same effect. And David heard. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were very frightened. Okay, let me just pause right there. So if you're wondering, if you got a little bit of deja vu, that's totally fine. That's intentional. There's a lot of repetition from an oral culture. You got to repeat some of these phrases a lot. And in some cases, repeat some of the story, because we're probably blending some traditions in here. So the whole kind of reintroduction of David, you might be scratching your head going like, didn't we do all this last week, David and Jesse and whatnot? Well, you did, but you kind of have to do it again, because what if you're picking up, one week you read something in the temple and then the next week, the rabbi's reading something different. You kind of, it's like the previously on Lost, or the Lost class, right? What else do we want to say here? Again, the use of the word champion as they're describing him going up from the Philistine lines. So the word champion meaning the man between. He's going between the two forces. You can almost paint it. In fact, many people have. I probably should have brought some paintings with me. And so Goliath is out there standing in the middle, the first one to take all the arrows. Okay, let me pause there. Any questions or observations, anyone? Everyone at home okay? Can still hear us? Great. Everyone's excited. What's going to happen? And a man of Israel said, have you seen this man coming up? Why, to insult Israel, he comes up. And the man who strikes him down, the king will enrich with a great fortune, and his daughter will give him, and his father's household he will make free of levies in Israel. And David said to the men who were standing with him, what will be done for the man who strikes down yonder Philistine and takes away insult from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should insult the battle lines of the living God? And the troops said to him to the same effect, thus will be done for the man who strikes him down. And Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke with the men, and Eliab was incensed with David, and he said, why is it that you have come down, and with whom have you left that bit of flock in the wilderness? I'm the one who knows your impudence and your wicked impulses, for it's to see the battle that you've come. And David said, what now have I done? It was only talk. And he turned away from him towards someone else, and he spoke to the same effect. And the troops answered him with words like the ones before. And the words David had spoken were heard, and they told them to Saul, and he fetched them. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail him. Your servant will go and do battle with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you cannot go against this Philistine to do battle with him, for you are a lad, and he is a man of war from his youth. And David said to Saul, a shepherd has your servant been for his father with the flock, with a lion in his forehead, and the stone sank into his, I skipped the page. When the lion or the bear would come and carry off a sheep from the herd, I would go out after him and strike him down and rescue it from his clutches. And if he would rise against me, I would seize his beard and strike him and kill him. Both lion and bear your servant has struck down. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, for he has insulted the battle lines of the living God. All right, let me pause there. There's nothing to lead you to believe that Goliath is all wearing all that armor and yet his private parts are showing. But they refer to him as uncircumcised because it sets him apart. It sets the Philistines apart from Israel. And all of Israel's men are circumcised.
He's like unclean.
He's
Is that
unclean,
what
he's
yucky?
impure, he's feral,
Yeah.
all those things you want to attribute to it. He's another. That's not a lost reference. I mean, like, that's like xenophobia,
Yeah.
And this part gets forgotten or downplayed a lot, but the dialogue with his older brother Eliab, that's been set. You were wondering probably what was all with all that background. Well, now it's paying off. The brothers are all older. They're all fighting in battle for Israel. So they're there standing in the line with the troops. And here comes their little son, who he calls impudent and wicked. Spoiler alert for future things. Maybe David's not always cracked up to be. And it's like watching your teenage little brother come in and be like, get out of here. The big boys are playing. And David is going, oh, well, I've killed lions and bears. I'm no spring chicken.
Oh my,
Yeah.
oh my.
Oh my, yes, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. And here he is, having this kind of dialogue with both Saul and in some ways to the whole troops to kind of prove his worthiness. And again, they're all quaking, they're all terrified. Sorry, we're lost. That's right.
Yeah.
Hi. Peekaboo.
We had,
Susan, go ahead. And then
It's
Dave.
interesting. Some of what you read reminded me of when Yoda speaks.
Absolutely, yeah. It really is.
Okay.
That's-
Or if you're translating from Latin with the verb at the end of it there.
Exactly right. It is. It's funny how it's all backwards. Hang on one sec. Then is don't move the owl because you might
Ever.
disconnect it. Ever, yeah. Especially while recording. Sorry, we're back. David, what were you going to say?
No, I was just waving that you were back. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that David's first question is, well, what do you get if you kill this Philistine?
Exactly.
I
What's in
kinda
it for
love-
me?
Yeah, I kind of love that one of the things too is a tax break. Like
Yeah.
they're saying they won't, like you won't tie you anymore.
Yeah, I would go fight a Goliath for a tax break. Absolutely.
We had said last week and or 2 weeks ago, I guess,
Yeah.
that there's almost like 3 stories where David's getting introduced.
Yep.
And we, mainly David, speculated, or he probably knows,
Yeah.
but that it was, that we might have just tucked 3 different stories in because no one wanted to get rid of anything.
Right.
So you kind of.
That's a great
it
idea.
doesn't make a ton of sense for David to be anointed and his brother's still like, why would you be here? Because if
Yeah.
you know he's anointed to be
Mhm.
king, it would make sense.
Right.
And then it doesn't make sense if he's playing the liar and this favored person of Saul, why would you be here?
That's a great,
Because he's favored.
that's a great speculation.
So at every point, he starts out as this little unimportant shepherd boy.
Mhm.
And then there's 3 times where he kind of gets elevated to be an important figure.
Yeah,
And I just wanted to sort of bring that for the people who weren't here last week.
yeah,
Said-
including me.
Yeah, it makes, or 2 weeks ago.
I love it because it calls into question that if I were to have my best guess, I bet the anointing was a story that came from a different tradition later and got added back in to because the anointings, we've talked about this before, that's the sacrament in some
Mhm.
ways. So you want to kind of say, oh, not only did he just win against Goliath, which we all know, but he was also anointed too, he's special.
So this account, the whole First Samuel is very much a eulogy for David, or, you're really promoting him. But there are these little details that we're seeing, like the one I mentioned, and the one you mentioned about his older brother not being quite so impressed with David's motives. All this is kind of subtext that's not really in there, but it begins to get us to see that David maybe has some very human foibles, and he has his own ambitions and kind of maybe the typical younger child that has big expectations, whatever, anyway, whatever you want to say. But yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's interesting subtext here about the character of David.
Yep. And I love the thing too, that in chapter 16, David came to Saul's court with
Mhm.
gifts. And then so it's like David is already politically savvy at this young age and knows how to butter up the king, right? But David also knows, okay, well, like Charity was saying, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
Or as David, you were saying, yeah, what do I get if I defeat Goliath? And all of this lore gets woven in, if you're going to make something sound epic in the Bible, you're going to give it a 40 days time lapse, right? So basically for 40 days, every day in the morning, they line up, fight, and Israel's too afraid to fight, and Goliath goes out and taunts them.
Mhm.
And I love that David's rationale, basically kind of the rhetorical question of, is nobody going to do anything? Saying, what will be done for the man who strikes down yonder Philistine and takes away insult from Israel? And you wonder if that's maybe the thing that's hurting that David it's right, making David rise to the occasion, is he's insulting Israel. Come on, guys, man up.
Mhm.
Or that's the motive that the writer of First Samuel is giving David, anyway.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well said. All right, back to it. I'll keep with this translation just for some consistency. That's okay. This Yoda translation. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail him. Your servant will go and do battle with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you cannot go. Oh, wait, I've already read that part. I gotta start flipping back pages. Here we go. Thank you. Is it 25?
I think so. Where I marked that.
Did I go too far? Sorry, everyone. Hold on, I got lost. It's all the repetition.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, 37.
37, thank you. Yeah.
Fine.
And David said, the Lord who has rescued me from the lion and the bear, will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. And Saul clothed David in his own battle garb and put a bronze helmet on his head, with him armor. And David girded his sword over his garments, but he was unable to walk, for he was unused to it. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk in these, for I am unused to it. And David removed them. And he took his stick in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the creek and put them in the shepherd's pouch he had in the satchel. And his slingshot was in his hand. And he came forward toward the Philistine. And the Philistine was drawing near to David, the man bearing the shield before him. And the Philistine looked and saw David, and he despised him, for he was a lad and ruddy with good looks. And the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you should come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said, come to me, that I may give your flesh to the fowl of the heavens and the beasts of the field. And David said to the Philistine, you come with me with sword and spear and javelin. I come to you with the name of the Lord of armies, God of the battle lines of Israel, that you have insulted. This day shall the Lord give you over into my hand, and I will strike you down and take off your head. And I will give your corpse and the corpses of the Philistine camp this day to the fowl of the heavens and the beasts of the earth. And all the earth shall know that Israel has a God. And all this assembly shall know that not by sword nor by spear does the Lord rescue, or the Lord's is the battle, and he shall give you into our hand. And it happened that the Philistine arose and was drawing near David, that David hastened and ran out from the lines toward the Philistine. And he reached his hand into the pouch and took from there a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead. And the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. And David bested the Philistine with sling and stone, and he struck down the Philistine and killed him. And no sword was in David's hand. And David ran up and stood over the Philistine and took the sword from him, pulled it out of its sheath, and finished him off and cut off his head with it. And the Philistines saw that their warrior was dead, and they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah rose and shouted and gave chase to the Philistines until you come to the ravine and until the gates of Ekron, and the Philistine dead fell on the way to Sharon and as far as Gath and Ekron. And the Israelites came back from pursuing the Philistines and looted their camps. And David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem, but his weapons he put in his tent. And when Saul saw David sallying forth toward the Philistine, he said to Abner the commander, "Whose son is the lad, Abner?" And Abner said, "By your life, king, I do not know." And the king said, "Ask you, pray, whose son is the youth?" And when David returned from striking down the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, the Philistine's head in his hand. And Saul said, "Whose son are you, lad?" And David said, "The son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." The end. It almost like a fairy tale.
Just proves that ranged weapons are superior to melee weapons.
Exactly,
That's the
exactly.
take home for sure.
David, I forgot the low-hanging fruit here. That are you feeling some kinship to your namesake? Do you fight
Well,
without sword?
I think that had some reason why my parents, who are very religious, maybe named me that, but I'm not that much like him. No, not actually.
There's so much lore, there's so much legend, myth, even all wrapped up, and a lot of theology as well. And you can tell that David is basically treated like a god in some ways. And there's so much, like I said, kind of poetry to the whole thing, and it came to pass. You know, these are stories they tell around campfires of their great hero king. Yeah.
Didn't the Jews also back in that day they believed in something, I can't remember exactly what it was called, a Nephilim or something, where they were giant people that were fallen angels
Oh wow.
and
Nephilim.
female.
Nephilim. Yeah.
The Nephilim, when they lived in that time, they were a combination of a fallen angel and a human mother. And they were the
Cool.
giants that roamed the earth back then.
Yeah, yeah. I don't
Yes,
know.
you're right, Carol. And at the time of Jesus, they believed the Nephilim were who the demons were as well. You know,
Aha.
that they were part man, part mortal and part angel, and as angels, they couldn't eat. They were constantly hungering, but they couldn't digest human food. So yeah, that's it. And then the film, some people do connect Goliath with the Nephilim. Yeah, exactly.
How do you spell that word?
Nephilim.
I'm sorry? Thank you.
You can
Fabulous.
find a lot. There, I think there's some references biblically, and there's some extra biblical references, like I think in Enoch. I'm not sure, but they talk about yeah.
Nephilim, yeah.
Thank you. I've never heard that word before.
Cool. A lot of this is played both for comedy and for just visual description of, again, I'm serious about the campfire story part of it. If you've got a little grandfather in the village telling these stories to, Israelites, and of course they're in exile, and the stories going to kids, or young boys who want to someday be in the army or whatnot too, or just anyone who's just aspiring to get out of this plight that they're currently in as a country, and to get back into God's favor. This story brings some comfort, and David is an embodiment of Israel itself. They're not as strong or as big as the Philistines. They're not as good in battle. So they are, like David, literally a child wearing all that heavy armor and dragging it, like the end of the movie Big, when the kid is, Tom Hanks is shrunk back down to a kid, he's dragging the clothes behind him. That's both for humor and to underscore the point. I mean, this kid is embodying Israel in general, you know, always the put upon the young whipperscrapper.
Well, it's kind of interesting too that all these people in the Bible that are the heroes, that are the ones that save the nation, are the youngest of the line.
Yeah,
Joseph, David,
yep,
Moses.
right.
They're obviously the youngest child
At
in the
least-
whole line of their,
The least,
their
the last,
family.
yeah. And especially in a world that still to this day, look, it happens in King of England, for heaven's sake, you know, the oldest male gets
Mhm.
the rights to those kind of things here, which is probably why Eliab is a little grumpy
Yeah.
watching David go off and win the battle. And David wins, of course, with smarts, not with you know, and using a skill that he's skilled at, not playing Goliath's game, which is something a little too that just becomes part of literature and movies and everything to this day.
As Carol points out, yeah, that this is a pattern you see in the Old Testament over and over again, even with when it goes back to Abraham and, you know, and his son, and then up through the patriarchs, the younger son is often chosen. And I think it illustrates first off that, you know, God sometimes has a soft spot for the underdog, and also that this is not being done necessarily through the power of the most powerful person, but it's being done through the power and the you know, the authority that God gives them. And it's God's power at work here, not necessarily the person's.
I also like the symbolism of Saul putting David in his own gear.
Mhm.
And we know, again, you know what's coming is that literally David's going to become the next king. And so as if Saul is symbolically handing David the kingdom right there and doesn't even realize it, because again, Saul's kind of inept in this role. And again, that legend, that lore around it all, I mean, forgetting the fact that he's met the kid already and they know who he is and from, it's like how quickly they forget. It becomes a Shakespearean comedy almost. And he's Abner, who is that kid again? Abner's like, I beats the hell out of me. Yeah.
So is this a separate story, or does he really, you know, is it just like this happened actually before he started playing the lyre for him, or was it or did he, or because because Saul had mental issues, does he just not remember?
Probably all of the above. Yeah. I think you have to assume the storytelling and really the editing of this book over thousands of years probably manipulated some of the story points, not unlike the way the gospel writers tell, you know, different aspect of Jesus, and sometimes, particularly in John, completely in a different sequence. You know, for example, John has Jesus destroying the money changers' tables early in the gospel, not at the conclusion. So that, you know, that just that's a product of both, I think, the writing, the adding in or weaving in of these other traditions and stories about David to get the anointing in, to get the lyre in, because why is the lyre so important? Because David's the attribute on the Psalms, which is almost laughably impossible that David also sat down and wrote 150 Psalms, but he probably wrote a couple of them, and Psalm 23 is famously attributed to him too. I'm thinking of there's a movie about King David with Gregory Peck, and I cannot remember the name of it. And he sits down with his little lyre and starts singing.
Is it Bathsheba? Or
Maybe that's it, yeah.
Susan Hayward played
Could be, yeah.
Bathsheba.
I just remember David sitting down and crossing his legs with his lyre as an adult and just going, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. And I was like, oh, I wish it happened like that. Not quite. So, you know, they want to get all of the stories in, just in the same way the gospel writers wanted to get in. Okay, but he was also born from a virgin, you know, and also she has cousins, and John the Baptist was foretold as well. You know, it's like you want to get all those beats in the same way you want to tell a superhero story. You can't tell the story of Superman without the parents sending him from Krypton. You know, there's that it's hollow without that part. So you knew I'd bring it to Superman. So What other
Oh,
things?
I'm
Yeah.
thinking, does anyone ever see that old cartoon, The Sword in the Stone?
Yeah,
Yeah,
And do you remember they keep calling him Wart? He's really little. And all the big guys are in their armor and they're fighting and he's lost the sword. And he goes and he like, he's able to pull it out, but he's just this little guy, really skinny, struggling with it. And how it's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm thinking with David and all this armor. And in that movie, it's just, he's really gotta be the right chosen one,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
At that point, that little guy, if he can do
That's
this.
exactly right.
It just makes everyone convinced, like, yes, he's absolutely the
Yeah.
right chosen person, no matter what else is going on. And I keep kind of having that poor little cartoon.
Yeah.
Arthur
Yeah.
pulling out that
Yeah.
sword he's
Yeah.
struggling with. I think it's the same kind of thing.
It
It is.
If we
They're
do
all
this, he's definitely the guy we gotta get behind.
Mhm.
exactly.
Mm.
They say, and in fact, I bought a book about it, that there's basically just 7 plots in all of storytelling. Since the dawn of humans telling stories, there's really just 7 stories, and they're pretty iconic. They're things like rags to riches, good over evil, things like. And this must be one of them. This idea of the unexpected rising up,
Plucky underdog.
plucky underdog, right? Whippersnapper. But it also, there's really something really artistic about it too, and it can get a little grisly with him walking around with that head, but but back then that was a sign of triumph. Yeah, that's the spoils of war. And there's this line in here which should make you today feel uncomfortable, which is, can't they just take the victory and just go? But instead, the Israelites came back from pursuing the Philistines and looted their camps. It just war begets war.
Well, there's something through history, the head of your enemy,
Putting
in
on
old
spike.
England, they
Yeah.
put it on their pikes and their
Yeah.
walls, it's like, you've gotten their
Right.
head, that's.
In every tradition ever, the Medusa story, is all about
Right.
the head, cutting off the head. You'll hear a lot in Advent, maybe not a lot, but from time to time, I think in some of the readings coming up or some of the Psalms, you often hear Jesus or David. Remember one of the Gospels, Matthew, which is the gospel we're doing in this new year, will make a connection that Jesus is in the line of David, which we can't really verify. But it's there again to retrofit Jesus into the narrative. So it even happens with Jesus to put him into this line here too.
Which is hard for me to understand, because according to what they say, Joseph had to go back to Bethlehem because that was his area, his town of origin, and he was from the line of David, and Joseph had no biological
Exactly.
lineage to Jesus at all.
Right.
Was Mary one of Joseph's cousins or something? Was he from the line of David as well?
Right. It's a inconvenient truth
Yeah.
that you have the birth of Jesus coming, or the pregnancy of Mary coming not from Joseph, but the man of the household is Joseph, the father. So it's actually, in a double-edged sword kind of way, a real wonderful affirmation of adoption. Of just saying he's just as good as a biological son. And then to say, yeah, but also it's convenient too, because it will connect David to Jesus in this lineage. But I was going to say too, they will often refer to it in poetry or psalmody as from the branch of Jesse. And that means if you see Jesse, that's the father of David. So the branch of Jesse, you get this kind of family tree perspective. Ironically, Jesse is this derivative of the same name for Jesus. So there's kind of a circle to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Jesse, Joshua, those are all the same names. Yeah. Just a little Advent fun for you there.
Mhm.
The branch, that's kind of an Isaiah thing too, of the branch, from the branch of Jesse will come our Savior, our King. And yes, you're right. The son of your servant, the last line, son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemites. Bethlehem is key here, the city of David, or literally the city of life.
Right.
Son of you lad. I'm going to resist going into chapter 18 this week because we're close to the end and we're going to get into the story of David and Jonathan. And Susan has lent me a book that has some great insight into the relationship of David and Jonathan. So I actually want to later today flip through that, scan some pages for you all to look at. So yeah, that's homework, but optional, of course. And then we can get into the David and Jonathan story too, which, if you did not know, has grown into a significant source of comfort for the gay community, because it's not clear, and sometimes it's intentionally unclear, if Jonathan and David might have been.
Goodness.
There you
that
go.
David got around, didn't
There we speak it, an unquiet love. So there you go. But what a wonderful, wonderful, greatest hits of the Bible, top 10 greatest moments in Bible history today, which is so much fun. I'm glad I was back for it. Well, thanks, everyone.
Bye, have a good week.
Until next time.
See ya. Sunday.
Take care.
Okay, see you soon.
Right.